My husband finally cut off his toxic mom and sister when they demanded we hand over our house to his jobless sister and her family. So, here's the deal with my in-laws. They have a pretty toxic relationship with my partner, and it's seriously starting to mess with my life. My husband, Jacob, was always the golden child growing up, super close to his mom and all. His dad was always busy with work, so Jacob and his mom spent tons of time together. But then there's his sister, Sarah, who gets treated quite differently by their mom. I'm sure she loves both her kids, but she definitely favors Jacob. I bet Sarah felt that growing up, and maybe that's why Jacob has always tried to be her supportive big brother. But sometimes Sarah and my mother-in-law act in ways that are honestly over the top. Like when Jacob and I were newly dating, and he was living with his parents. They gave him his own floor for privacy, so I'd stay over sometimes. One morning, Sarah just barges into the room without knocking while we're still in bed. I mean, come on, we weren't exactly dressed for visitors. She'd just act like everything was normal and chat about random stuff. It was super awkward, especially since Sarah and I barely knew each other then. I talked to Jacob about it and said there needs to be a lock on the door, otherwise I wouldn't come over. He agreed to it, but the next morning, Sarah threw a fit over the locked door. She started banging on it, demanding Jacob let her in. When he finally did, she yelled at him, blaming me for the lock and calling me a skank, which was a shocker. Jacob told Sarah he wanted the lock, but she wasn't buying it. She stormed off after accusing me of coming between her and her brother. I'm not one for confrontations, so I took a breather in the bathroom while Jacob tried to calm her down. He came back, apologized, and promised to get her to apologize. The next weekend, Sarah did apologize, but it sounded pretty half-hearted. She made some lame excuse about needing to talk to Jacob urgently. Jacob made it clear she shouldn't disturb us again, and she agreed, though not very enthusiastically. But that wasn't the end of Sarah's weird behavior. She'd make comments when Jacob and I disagreed on things, like we shouldn't be together if we didn't have the same taste in movies. Jacob would give her a look, but she'd just smirk. She also loved asking me awkward, nosy questions about my past, like why my ex and I broke up, or snarky stuff like how Jacob's ex was prettier. It felt like she was trying to mess with me when we were alone. At first, I stayed quiet, but one day I snapped back, saying I liked my ex's family better because they weren't so nosy. That shut her up for a bit. As for my mother-in-law, she wasn't much better. At first, she ignored me entirely. When she realized Jacob was serious about me, she started acting like I was stealing her son away. She'd snub me at family gatherings and dinners. Jacob noticed and tried talking to her, but it never changed anything. She even called me stuck up and spoiled because I went to a private school and she was a public school teacher. She tried to convince Jacob not to marry me, saying he could find someone better. Thankfully, Jacob didn't care about her opinion and proposed anyway. But that's just how things are with Sarah and my mother-in-law. Wow, so get this, I was totally floored when I found out that Jacob had popped the question. Then I got this call from two people who said it was a terrible idea, and because Jacob wouldn't listen to them, they thought I should just break up with him and give the ring back. I found that super weird and told them no way. I mean, I love Jacob and want to spend forever with him. They were way out of line. When they realized they couldn't sway me, Jacob's mom kind of came around, saying I should aim to be the best wife and take care of him like she did. Honestly, I was a bit offended but tried not to let it get to me. His sister Sarah, though, took it up a notch and accused me of being a gold digger, saying Jacob deserves someone with more status. She even threatened to spill the beans before our wedding to stop it from happening. After that chat, I had to tell Jacob everything. He was shocked at how disrespectful they were being. Even though he stood up for me, his mom and Sarah still thought I wasn't good enough. Jacob told me not to worry about them and reassured me of his love, but it still sucked not having his family's support. We had already decided to pay for our own wedding, and when his mom offered to chip in, we politely turned her down. Jacob explained that we'd saved up for this. Instead of being happy, she got even more upset, moaning to Jacob about how he didn't need her anymore. But hey, on the plus side, Jacob's dad was super chill and happy for us. To keep the peace with his mom, we let her plan the rehearsal dinner, which seemed to make her happy. But then Sarah started pulling more antics. She invited herself over for dinner, saying she missed Jacob. We were living on our own, so I thought she really wanted to hang out with her brother. I wasn't thrilled but agreed to dinner. During dinner, Sarah went off on this rant about cheating partners, which was awkward. Then she straight up looked at me and asked how it felt to be trash. I was like, what? She went on accusing me of cheating with a coworker, Zach, and even whipped out photos as proof. I was shocked because those pics were totally innocent. Sure, Zach and I were work buddies, but that's it. Plus, Zach had a girlfriend, which Jacob knew. Sarah had twisted friendly work moments into scandalous evidence. Her fake accusations were infuriating because it was clear she wanted to mess things up for us. Before I could even defend myself, Jacob was already on it, asking why she was stalking me and taking these pics without permission. Sarah tried to justify her actions by saying she was just looking out for her brother. Jacob set her straight, saying her claims were bogus and just causing unnecessary drama. She kept insisting on this imaginary affair. Things got super tense, so I finally said I'd report her to the police for stalking and snapping pics without my consent. That freaked her out, and she begged Jacob to talk to me, worried about her job. I told her she could only save herself now. She asked what I wanted, and I said I wouldn't file a report if she stayed out of my life. So, here's the lowdown on what happened with Sarah and all the wedding drama. Things got pretty intense, and Sarah was totally out of options. She looked to her brother, Jacob, for backup, but he sided with me and told her she should be thankful I was letting it slide because she was definitely in the wrong. Reluctantly, Sarah promised to steer clear of me, and honestly, we haven't chatted since. Jacob still keeps in touch with her, but she's ignored me from that day on. Then came the second big incident right before our wedding. It was at the rehearsal dinner, and my mother-in-law, who insisted on organizing the meal all by herself, turned down any help we offered. She assured us she had it all covered. But when we showed up, it was pretty clear it wasn't what we expected. Picture this: plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and a spread of chill Mexican food. Not exactly the vibe we were going for. My mother-in-law was miffed the whole time, which really put a damper on what was supposed to be a fun evening. She drank a bit too much and started acting out in front of everyone, repeatedly mentioning how she couldn't wait for the wedding to be over and how stressful it all was, even though she didn't help or chip in financially at all. Eventually, my father-in-law had enough and had to take her aside. Sarah jumped in, trying to make excuses for her mom, but her dad wasn't having any of it. As expected, the whole night turned into a bit of a mess, and I started fretting that my mother-in-law and Sarah would ruin the wedding day. That night, Jacob and I hit our first major disagreement. I told him straight up that he needed to uninvite Sarah and his mom since they'd probably try to steal the spotlight at our wedding. Jacob got pretty upset and insisted his dad would be there to keep things in check. But I was so worried about getting embarrassed again in front of everyone that I warned Jacob there wouldn't be a wedding if they were still coming. Jacob was shocked by my ultimatum, and though I knew it might seem extreme, I felt it was necessary to protect our big day. Thankfully, Jacob got where I was coming from and made the tough call. Early the next morning, he rang his dad to let him know that his mom and sister were no longer welcome. Surprisingly, Phil didn't seem too taken aback and assured Jacob he'd handle it and make sure they didn't crash the wedding. After we talked with Phil, my mother-in-law and Sarah started blowing up Jacob's phone, trying to convince him to change his mind. Jacob stood firm and told them flat out that he didn't want them there because of how they'd treated me. My mother-in-law didn't take it well, blaming me for driving a wedge between her and Jacob. Sarah tried to argue too, but Jacob was set on his decision. I felt a bit guilty that Phil couldn't be at the wedding because of all this, and I even second-guessed giving Jacob the ultimatum. But all that guilt vanished when I found out from Jacob's cousins that Sarah and my mother-in-law had planned to wear white to our wedding. They'd even tried to rally the other women in the family WhatsApp group to wear white too, claiming the bride shouldn't be the only one. I was floored by how far they'd go to get under my skin, and I was seriously relieved they weren't at the wedding. Jacob missed his family, no doubt, but he understood my side of things. In the end, our wedding day was beautiful, and no one attempted any shenanigans. Since then, my mother-in-law and Sarah have given me the cold shoulder, which is honestly fine by me. They only invite Jacob over for dinners or special occasions, but it doesn't bother me. Phil, on the other hand, has always been friendly, and we kept in touch over the years. Jacob and I worked hard, saved up, and finally bought our first home this year. We were over the moon to have something that was ours. Jacob's parents and Sarah did come over for a low-key housewarming party, but I used it as an excuse to hang out with my family instead. Then things took a surprising turn last month when my mother-in-law unexpectedly reached out. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, so it was a shock. She casually asked how I was doing, catching me off guard, but I kept it polite. Then she dropped a comment about how spacious our new home must feel with just Jacob and me living there. Ouch. That stung because she knew we'd been struggling with infertility for a while and had come to terms with never having kids. I even told Jacob he could leave and find someone who could give him children, but he reassured me that being childless together was perfectly okay. Our families knew all this, so her remark felt like a jab. She went on to announce that Sarah was pregnant again, which blew my mind since this would be her sixth kid. Jacob had already told me about Sarah's jobless boyfriend who didn't believe in birth control, leading to all these surprise pregnancies. Jacob says the guy treats Sarah like some kind of live-in maid, doing nothing around the house or helping with the kids while she juggles several part-time gigs, and he spends his days playing video games. People have tried talking sense into her, but nothing changes. So here's the deal. My mother-in-law went off about how Sarah, my sister-in-law, never breaks up with her man. Then she dropped a bombshell, saying that since Sarah can't afford to work while she's pregnant, Jacob, my husband, and I should just give up our apartment because apparently, it's too spacious for just the two of us. I was floored by this and didn't even know what to say at first. I had to ask if she was joking, but nope, she was dead serious. She thought Sarah and her husband totally deserved a bigger place. But since there wasn't enough room at her own house, she thought it'd be fine for them to crash with us instead. I was trying hard to keep it together while processing this whole thing. I told her straight up that it was our home, and we were still paying it off, so letting someone move in without both Jacob's and my go-ahead was a no-go. She then claimed she'd already talked to Jacob and he was supposedly cool with it, which was super odd because we always keep each other in the loop about stuff like this. I told her that no one was moving in unless both of us agreed. I even said Sarah and her husband could stay for a short visit, but not as long-term roommates. Then she got all heated, saying as a daughter-in-law, it was my duty to make space for Sarah and her crew. She promised that if I just did this one thing, all past issues would be forgiven. At that point, I'd had enough and sarcastically said sure, I'd let them take over the place, as long as she covered the mortgage and other bills since Sarah and her husband wouldn't. I even suggested she might need a second job to afford this, which really sent her over the edge. She flipped out, screaming and saying I was being unreasonable. I calmly pointed out that expecting us to support Sarah's family was equally ridiculous, which sent her into a full-blown rage. Eventually, she hung up when she realized I wasn't budging. Not long after, Sarah called me up, yelling because I had the nerve to suggest her mom pay our mortgage. She accused me of being a gold digger. I shot back that she was the real gold digger, trying to freeload at our place without pitching in. I told her to check out her own husband if she wanted to see someone truly slacking. That shut her up for a bit. I made it clear that unless her family was ready to help with the mortgage, they weren't moving in. She accused me of being heartless and loving money more than family. Honestly, sticking up for myself felt pretty good, even if it was a messy situation. Now, I'm left feeling a bit guilty about the whole drama with my ex-husband, and I'm sitting here wondering if I've become the villain in this story. But here's an update, thanks to everyone who's had my back. A lot of folks have been asking why my mother-in-law would even demand something so ridiculous. Well, she's always been entitled, and my husband has let it slide for too long. We need to have a serious talk about it because it's pretty sad that she'd lie about her own kid just to get her way. My sister-in-law is just doing whatever her mom wants, hoping to stay on her good side. In this case, Sarah would have gotten a free ride while her husband stayed useless. I was waiting for Jacob to get back from a business trip so we could discuss all this in person. Finally, after 3 days, we sat down and talked it all out. I laid out how his mom called, telling us to give up our home to Sarah and her family. Jacob was shocked, and I filled him in on all the details. Turns out, he had no clue. Before he left, the only thing his mom mentioned was that Sarah was pregnant, nothing about us giving up our home. I told him firmly that he needed to talk to his mom because I couldn't handle dealing with his family alone anymore. He agreed and had a word with her. When he called her out, she tried to backpedal and claimed she hadn't actually lied, just assumed he'd be cool with Sarah staying with us. So, she decided to handle things herself and came straight to me. Jacob stopped her and asked why she thought he'd be cool with Sarah and her whole family moving in with us. My mother-in-law said that since Jacob and Sarah were close, he should naturally support her by letting her family crash with us. Hearing this, I just closed my eyes in frustration but kept quiet, letting Jacob deal with his mom. Jacob firmly told her there was no way Sarah, her jobless husband, and their 6 kids were moving into our place. He also told her she had no right to try to force us into taking care of them. My mother-in-law started yelling, saying Sarah desperately needed help, but Jacob told her it wasn't our responsibility. He said if she wanted to help, she could take Sarah and herself. She then blurted out that Phil didn't want them in their small house, and since we had a bigger place, we should be the ones to help. She even had the nerve to say that since I didn't have kids, looking after Sarah's would be fulfilling for me. I was shocked, but for the first time, I saw Jacob losing his cool. He told her off, saying she had no right to talk about me like that or use it to pressure me into taking care of Sarah's kids. Jacob continued, explaining that Phil didn't want anything to do with Sarah because she had just become a baby-making machine and he was fed up with both of them. My mother-in-law tried to backtrack, but Jacob wasn't having any of it. He told her he'd tried his best to keep a good relationship with them even though they disrespected me repeatedly, but he couldn't do it anymore. She begged him, but he made it clear this was our home, and anyone who disrespected me disrespected him too. That was it. Jacob ended the call, and since then, he hasn't spoken to Sarah or his mom. Phil later called Jacob and, after getting the whole story, understood why Jacob had to make such a tough decision. Phil apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I told him it wasn't his fault. Fast forward 2 weeks, and things have been interesting, to say the least. A lot of folks suggested I set up cameras around our house in case my mother-in-law and Sarah tried to cause trouble. So, I got some cameras online and set them up. Just my luck, they showed up last weekend, banging on the door while I was home alone. When I saw them on the camera, I quickly called Jacob, who said he was on his way. I opened the door and there they were, furious. They asked to come in, but I refused, saying they could talk from outside. My mother-in-law started ranting, calling me callous, greedy, and selfish. I calmly told her this was our house and they couldn't just walk in uninvited. She kept going, not realizing the cameras were recording everything. I reminded her of our previous talk, saying I wasn't giving up our house for Sarah's family, and if she had more to say, she could wait for Jacob. Sarah then started yelling, accusing me of breaking up the family for no reason, being a gold digger, and trying to take Jacob away from them. I told them everything was being recorded and if they didn't leave, I'd use the footage to get a restraining order. They looked shocked, and my mother-in-law exclaimed that I wouldn't dare. I smirked and said if they didn't leave right away, they'd be getting a legal notice soon. That got them worried, and Sarah tried to say I was overreacting, that it wasn't a big deal. Luckily, Jacob showed up just then. He casually asked what they were doing. My mother-in-law rushed to hug him, but he resisted and demanded to know why they were there. Sarah claimed I was trying to control his life by separating him from them, but Jacob made it clear it was his decision, and he didn't want anything to do with them. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, but Jacob just told them to leave, or he'd call the cops. They were stunned, not expecting that reaction from him. He told them if they ever showed up again, we'd call the police and have them removed. They left, looking devastated, but Jacob didn't care anymore. I was relieved he finally stood up for me. Jacob has talked to Phil, who was as surprised as we were that his wife and Sarah came over unannounced. Phil agreed we were right not to let them in and was disgusted by their behavior. With Jacob being firm about kicking them out, I doubt they'll dare to return. If they do, I'll get a lawyer immediately. I'm glad my husband finally realized how toxic his family can be, and I hope this is the last update on this drama. I'm ready to move on and just live our lives peacefully. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life drama stories around you.